How to actually rig anything. Rigging is the main interface with the character. This is exactly how an animator will actually interact with the character. It's like a digital puppet to bring it to life. What we will talk about. A good rig makes life easier. Your quality of life as an animator will be much, much better. And a bad rig, it will be hell to work with. I will teach you how to make a good one. Listen up, take notes, and subscribe. My name is Dwayne Elahie. I'm a CG Supervisor, been in the industry for 20 plus years, been mentoring for 15 plus years, and many of my students now have a salary of 70K plus. I've been at these studios, EA, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, and many others. We haven't met yet, but you've met my work. You can check out my IMDb. I've worked on such projects such as James Cameron's Avatar, Netflix The Witcher, and been the CG rigging supervisor for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. You may have seen these films and TV shows, K-pop Demon Hunters, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and many others. So let's get into it. How do you rig anything? In Blender, you can rig without armatures, which is their bone system, but armatures are better, mainly because Blender has designed it to work well with the rest of the interface of Blender. The organization of it is well integrated with the rest of it. Their constraint system, armatures have its own bone constraint system on top of the regular constraints, which is different than a lot of other 3D software, which could throw people off. So learning how that works will make it a lot easier. And also the way it's designed to export with ease to things like Unity and Unreal. So let's see how this is done in Blender. Let's talk about the armature basics. So we're in object mode. I deleted everything in the scene. If we go to add and do armature, or you could do Shift A and then you could add an armature here, you have this armature right there. Now the thing is, an armature is an object mode, right? The actual bones inside, it automatically creates one bone. That is kind of like, you have to go into edit mode to see it, kind of like a geometry. And in edit mode, then you have access to these bones over here. Now, a bone actually has, if I go hover over the outliner and press period, you'll see over here, you only see one bone right there, but you see the anatomy of the bone right here. If I go select that, go to view selected, a bone has a head and a tail. You can select these both things, but the actual object is just that one bone. And you can take the tail of this and select it and move it around, and the bone will point to it, at least the orientation. If you want to see it, you can select the bone and that will move the whole thing. And in here, you'll have, when you select the bone, you have this bone properties. When you have that selected, you'll see that you have options for the head to, like, the head is the bottom part here, that base, and the tail is this part here. And you can move it individually. And one thing that's helpful, if you actually click on the data for the armature as a whole, you can click on names and you'll see the names of the bones. But what's useful is seeing the axis, and you can see the orientation of that, right? Now, if you want to, I'll get rid of the visibility there. If you want to create a new bone, what you could do either is select a tail. You could press E for extrude, and you can move out another one. And then you could place it, the tail of it, to get the orientation. Again, you can turn on the orientation for here on the data, object data for the armature as a whole, not the individual bones. And you could see that. And if you want to change the name of a bone, you could click on the bone and you could click on here and change bone. You could call this bone B, for example, and this one bone A. You could also change it directly in the outliner as well. And one thing, you could also do parenting. You could add another bone. If you click here, have it empty, you could go to bone, Shift A. When you're already in edit mode of an armature, you can press Shift A and it'll create a bone. And you'll see that's how it is. It's going to be created at the base. It's not connected to anything. And this is bone. I'll call this bone new just so you could see. Now you could also parent bone, so you could select the bone base, which is, they call it the head, and that's the tail. But you select the head, hold Shift, and you could select this other bone. It doesn't matter if you take the head or the tail. If you hold Shift and select, I press Control Z. I select this one, hold Shift, select that. If you press Control P to parent, you could also do it in here under Armature Parent, and you can say make parent Control P, and actually you have to do that again, Control P, you get an option, either keep offset or connected. If you do connected, it's going to move the head onto the tail of the bone you're parenting. And now here you can, if you try to move it, they'll stay connected. And if I press Control Z and undo, the difference is if you select this and hold Shift, select that, Control P, and say keep offset, they are still parented, but they stay where they are. And you just have a dot that's there that kind of indicates what it is. Now, the other thing I want to show is this is what confuses a lot of people. If I go back to object mode, if I try to select one of these bones, anytime I try to select it, all it's actually doing is selecting the armature. This is similar to as if I deselect everything, Shift A, and I'll do mesh, and I'll add a cube, for example, and I'll press G and I'll just move it over here. If you're trying to select, let's say I select this and I'm going to show the wireframe over there. If I'm trying to select, let's say the vertex of a cube, you can't select it because you're in object mode. What you have to do is select the cube first in object mode and go to edit mode. And then you could actually select it, the vertices. That's similar to, if I go to object mode here, to an armature. If you select any part of the bone of an armature in object mode, you're selecting the entire armature, not the bone. If you want to select the bone, you have to go into edit mode and you could select it, or you could go into pose mode. What's the difference? In edit mode, you could actually set up your structure of your bone and your skeleton. So if you want to add bones, like Shift A, or if you want to, you could duplicate a bone, Shift D, if you select it and you can duplicate it, or you could select a tail and press E to extract it, to extrude one, right? But once you have it set up, and also the parenting, once you have it set up, you'll go to pose mode. And pose mode is actually how you want to animate it, and if you want to set up bone constraints, and if you want to set up visual controls for that. So here, this is where you will select this and you could actually animate everything in here in pose mode. And edit mode goes back to the default, and you could place, okay, I want the bone placed here. And when you go to pose mode, it's going to keep the pose, the actual pose, based off of your original pose of the edit mode. If you want to reset it to go back, you go to pose mode, you could press select everything or press A to select all, and you could go to pose, clear all transform, or you could just do the location or rotation or scale, but I'll do all transform, and it's going to reset back to the initial setup of edit mode. That's the default. So that is the basics of bones, or the hierarchy, or the armature. Let's talk about skinning. Select the mesh first, or the geometry, hold Shift, and then select the bone. Even if the bone is inside the mesh, Blender will know to select it. Control P. And the first thing you do is with automatic weights, and Blender will automatically calculate the weights for you. So you could select this, and you could now rotate. Well, first you have to go to object mode. Select the armature, you're in object mode. You have to then go to pose mode. So now you can select the individual bones and to animate. That's what pose is for, to pose it. And then now you can see that these are, Blender will automatically like paint the weights for you, or basically say which vertices should follow which bones automatically. Now, that's could be fine for something really quick, but in a lot of productions, is not really there. What actually happens is when you select the mesh, I'm going back to object mode, I select the mesh or the object, I could go to the data properties, object data properties, or data properties, how you want to pronounce it, and you'll see for every bone that you create, it automatically makes a vertex group, and each vertex group, you basically select the vertices and say, I want those vertices to be associated with these vertex group. And basically you're saying that I want these vertices to follow these bones, and I'm going to actually animate a little bit. So I'll take this one while in pose mode, I'll hover over the viewpoint and press I. It's going to key the rotation scale and the location of it. I'll go to frame 10. I'll just rotate it a bit and press I, and it's going to key that. So now it's moving, right, in pose mode. What I want to do is actually paint. How you paint, first I'll go back to object mode. See, the animation still works, but to paint the weights, what you do is first select the armature. You select the armature first in object mode, then hold shift, then you select the mesh or the object, the geometry. It's important the order because when you do that, you'll have these options. You'll still have the object mode, edit mode, sculpt mode, vertex, weight, paint, and texture. Those are the options when it's a geometry. If you did it the other way around, if you did geometry, then the armature, you'll only have the options here for the armature, which is edit and pose. So that's why in object mode, select the armature first, hold shift, select geometry. Then you could go into paint mode. With those both selected, you'll have these three options. This is kind of like to mask, so you could paint areas that you don't want to paint. Basically, you select the faces you don't want to paint weights on. And here in this mode, we can press 1, 2, 3. You have to be over the viewport to press 1, 2, 3 to switch it with hotkeys. So 2, if you press 2, this allows you to go in and actually like select vertices. You can select these, for example, and you can select these vertices. The options are down here. In this mode, this allows you to actually select the back, switch bones. What you do is select this, hold Alt, and click on the bone, and then it was going to switch to the bone as an influence. And then you could actually paint. So, for example, since I animated that, if I move this forward, let's say I want this top bone, I hold Alt and select this. We'll draw over here, and if I click on this option up here, you'll see there's different draw modes. I click on this, I could say, let's say add, right? And then you could choose, this is better with like a Wacom or like a pressure pen. You could say the weight and strength, and then you could adjust the radius. I could press F to change the radius, Shift F to change the strength, and it'll be less fall off, and then you can start painting. We could rigid bind this. You select the geometry and then hold shift, select the armature, and then press Control P. And this time we're going to rigid bind. So instead of automatic weights, we're going to say empty groups. So now if I select this geometry and I go to the object data properties, you have the groups for each bone, but the animation is still on here. They're not actually moving. But you could see on the modifier, there's an armature modifier. That is what's moving the bone. The bones are moving or deforming the mesh. So how you actually do it is you select the geometry, go to the actual data object properties here, and I'm going to select the bottom vertex groups. That is associated with the bottom bone. How I'm still in the geometry, I'll go into edit mode. I'll make sure nothing's selected. Hover over the geometry that I want and I press L, and that will link all the selected ones. While that bone is selected, I'm going to see you have a weight value here. I'm going to say 1 is 100%, or it's going to follow that bone 100%. So if that bone's going to move, all the vertices with it will move with it 100%. And now I'm going to say assign, and that will move with it. So if I go back to object mode and let's say select the armature and then go to pose mode so I actually move it, now I can select the bone. I press G, you'll see that the geometry moved with the bone, the bottom bone. I'll press Control Z to undo. I'll go back to object mode, select the geometry, and I'll just continue, go into edit mode. This time I'm going to choose the middle bone. I'll deselect everything, hover over one vertex, press L to link them all, say assign. Then I deselect, I'll choose the top bone, hover over this vertex, press L, and then assign. So now they're all rigid bind. Now if I go back to object mode, now they're all rigid bind to this skeleton or this armature. So now if I go to the armature, go to pose mode, if I select this, see now they're all moving independently. So I'm going to show you how constraints work with bones. What you have to do is with the armature selected in object mode, you have to then go to pose mode. You build constraints in pose mode, not edit mode. And then in here, what you could do is now you could select that bone right? Now, because you're actually selecting the bone of that armature. Now, you don't do a constraint. You do a bone constraint in pose mode, not edit mode, for an armature. And then they look very similar when you're in bone constraint. You see, look, they look like the same options because a lot of them are. You could do copy location, and now you could do target, and you can select this. If that target is another armature, you could have an option. You actually have to, well, I'll select the eyedropper and select it. It's not actually selecting here, so I will actually go here and do select the empty by name. And now you actually can go back to object mode and select that empty, for example. Press G, and now that bone, individual bone, is moving. Select the bones, which is actually selecting the armature because I'm in object mode. I'll then go into pose mode. Again, if you're going to do constraints, you have to be in pose mode. And what you could do is you could do an IK constraint or an inverse kinematic constraint. So I can select that bone, the last one here. I'll go to bone constraint. Remember, I'm in armature in pose mode. Select the bone in bone constraint, not constraint, bone constraint. Then go to add, and I'll say inverse kinematic. And you see it's going to change a different color. And then it's going to ask me what's my target. So I can select this eyedropper, and I'm going to save my IK one right here, which is still not selecting. So I'm just going to select it through here, IK empty here, and it's going to pop it over there. And I'm going to say, what is my pole object? It's that empty pole that I have here. And it looks like it's not, it moved around. And what you have to do in the IK constraint is just the pole angle. You have to point it in the right direction. So in this case, it's about -90. And now if I go, I can go in object mode. I can select this empty, that's the pole. And if I take that and move it, it's going to point where it is. And if I select this one and move, that's going to bend. So this could be used for a leg. Now let's talk about the rig aesthetics. Select these bones. You could right click and say symmetrize. If you call it .L or .R or _L or _R and select it and right click or choose armature symmetrize, it will make the opposite side for you and just change the names for you. Pose mode, because in pose mode you have more options to change the colors. You can change the color, and you have some presets. Default on the left side is usually blue. I'm good at, because we're in pose mode actually. So we're gonna go in, and I'm gonna choose that empty that I created. And whatever that shape that empty is, it's going to take it. So I'm going to take this object mode. So if I select this empty, because it's referencing it right now, the empty has those same one you created. They're actually just drawing display it. So you could just change them here and it'll change it there. You could offset the custom object. So you could say translate it up and down with an offset, or scale it bigger or smaller. Another thing that's very useful in rigging in general and any 3D software and engines like Unreal and Unity is have drivers. You could right click on it and just say add driver. So right now it's being driven, and you have this driver property that shows up. And then from here, you can choose what kind of driver. By default, it's going to be the name of, they call var. This is kind of like getting into scripting or coding a little bit. So this is the name that's created, and that's referring to that. And it's going to say whatever that value is. It's basically going to say take an object. I'm going to say select this object and click that. Now that's over there. If you want to go back to this, you could right click and you could say open driver editors. Wherever that location is, I want to take that value. Right now that value is 6.3. So that value is going to replace in here. And it's gonna, the expression is +0. So if I said +5, for example, it's gonna take the value of x on the empty, which is 6.336, plus the value of 5, and the output will be 11.36. That's why if you select this, you'll see the output is being driven by 11.66.
Quick heads up for all you 3D artists watching this. If you've been grinding away at tutorials and YouTube videos but still feel stuck, I've got something special for you. I'm hosting a 3D character rapid bootcamp workshop where I'll walk you step by step through the exact skills studios actually hire for. It's not theory. This is the stuff that got me hired and working in the industry. If you want to finally build a portfolio that gets callbacks and interviews, hit the link below and grab your spot. Seats are limited, so if you're serious about going pro, this is your chance.
What I'm going to do are create empties so I could actually place the origins of the bones. So I'm going to go into here, and you can press this button up here and it'll make another collection. I'll call this Mannequin instead of Geo. And this is going to be, call them Locators. Or you could call them empties. I'm just calling it Locators just to be universal because Maya kind of coined that term, and it's kind of like the de facto when you export to like Unreal and whatnot. No matter what software I use, like 3ds Max or Maya Softimage, Unreal, I just call empties. My Blender calls them empties, but I just call them Locators just to be consistent because they switch between different softwares. So now I'm going to select this so it's the actual collection. And now I'll press Shift A. I'll go to empty and I'll call it plain axis. And empty is what Maya calls it, what calls a locator. And 3ds Max, I think they call them helpers. So in here, I'll just change the name instead of empty. I'll call it LOC for locator for short, just because, again, my naming convention. You can call it whatever you want. And then in here, I'll just call this root. Actually, I'm going to do _C root. Actually, because it's Blender and the mirroring idea, I'm just going to take off the C, just because in Blender, the way Blender does mirroring with bones, you can put it in the front or the end, the L or the R, to mirror with the built-in tools. So I'm just going to keep that convention and not use C for center. So if it doesn't have a C, it means center. If it doesn't have an L for left side or R for right side, it's going to mean left side, or it's going to mean center. So now that I have that, I'm going to, if I press the slash key, which is on the left side of the shift key, you'll see that's isolated. I'll press slash again to move it. What I'm going to do is actually select the mesh. I'm going to go into the overlay here, and then I'm going to show wireframe so I can see it. And in here, what I'm going to actually do is put the center, figure out where the center of each piece is. They are broken up into separate pieces. So I'll go into edit mode, hover over 1. I'm in vertex select mode. You can press 1. Hover over, well, actually press Alt A to make sure nothing's selected, or go to select none. Hover over this mesh piece because it's a separate piece or a linked face, and press L. It will select everything. And if I press go in here, and if you do select inverse, and you could actually go in here and hide it. Press H to hide everything else. I'll just select this top one over here, and if you press Shift S, you'll say cursor to selected. And now that the cursor is to selected, when I go to edit mode in here, the cursor is where that point is, and that's where I want the center or the locator to be. All right, so now let's start placing the bones. Now that I have my locators or my empties placed, I could hide my geometry, and I'll just use these to create my bones. That'll be the bone, and what I'm going to do is rotate it about the x-axis. I'm going to snap the ends to each point there. So I'm gonna go back to object mode, select this object, Shift S, cursor to selected. So now the cursor's there. Now select this. Since I'm in object mode, that's the armature. I have to go to edit mode or press tab, select the bone. Now I actually selected the bone. Well, actually it's not the bone. I'm going to select this, which is I forget what they call that, the head or the tail. So this is the tail. That's what they call the tail, but select it. Now if I press, while in edit mode, Shift S and say selection to cursor. So now that's going to snap there. For vertex weighting, this is how you assign it in Blender. Select the mesh, hold Shift, and then select the armature in object mode. and then Control P as if you're parenting, Blender will recognize that you have a geometry and an armature. Now you could choose automatic weights, but we're going to do them manually. Edit mode, select the vertices I need, or I'll press Alt-A to deselect. Let's say I hover over here and press L. It will select everything for the head. And then I'll look for the head here. I'll type in head. I'll select it. Make sure it's 1. Assign. It will assign it 100 of vertex number of 1 on it. And if I now go back to object mode, select any of the bone, that selects the armature, go to edit pose mode to actually move it. If I select this bone and if I move it, it will actually move. The IK, it's a constraint in Blender. So how you do it, object mode. Just to start out here, let me go to the geometry, just hide that. And for here, select any part of the bone in object mode. That'll select the armature, go to edit mode in this case, and it'll switch back to the bone view. Now in this case, this bone over here, if I go over the outliner and press period, it's a child of the lower leg, which is fine in most cases. But what I'm going to do, just in this case, normally you would do a reverse foot roll, but we're not going to do that in this case. Right now, what we're going to do is just take this and make it a child of that bone. But before I do that, I actually do want to show one other thing. Let me show the geometry again. Not the locators, the geometry. If I take this bone and move it, notice the geometry does not deform. If I press Ctrl Z, because you're in edit mode. This allows you, even if you set up, let's say IK and things move around, it's not going to deform the mesh. Only in pose mode, if you select this and let's say move it, then it actually affects the geometry. So just wanted to point that out. So let me just go back to edit mode, turn off the geometry. I'll select this bone. I'll hold shift and select that bone that I created, and I'll press Control P and say keep offset. So now if I were to go to pose mode, take this control, because that's the bone, and move it, it's going to move the hierarchy of that bone. So it's not in this hierarchy anymore. And I'll go back to edit mode. I'll do the same thing here. I'll select this one, hold shift, select here, Control P, keep offset. If I go to pose mode, select this, that will move it. Okay. Other thing I want to do is, if you notice in pose mode, if I select the root and move it, they're not going to follow because these things have to follow with the root as well. So I'm going to select, go into edit mode, select this one, and this one, and then select the root. And just to see the names, I'll put on the names by going to the data. So I selected the bone setup IK leg here. I'll just go to the selection mode. Bone setup IK leg, bone setup IK for the left side, _L_R for the bone leg IK. And then for the pole as well, I hold shift and select here, And now I hold shift and select the bone root and press Control P and say keep offset. Now you see all those are now following that. Now if I go into pose mode, I'll take off the names so it doesn't distract, and I select the root. All of them will move, and this will follow there, that will follow here, and you have this bone like that. So now how will this work? If I go to edit mode, this is the left leg, the bone leg upper L_L, and this is the lower. And how Blender works with IK is, what you do is you have to be in pose mode, and you select what's going to control the IK, then hold shift and select the lower part of that IK chain, or that bone chain. And then in Blender, bones have constraints, but you don't use the constraint panel over here. You have to use the bone constraints. It's confusing because if you go to constraints, they have, let me just go show you, go to constraints and you say add constraint down, drop down. They have a lot of the names that look the same, and they don't tell you that there's something wrong, because what it does when you do a constraint, it actually constrains the whole armature as a whole and not the individual bones. But if you want to constrain the bones, you have to be in pose mode. We'll select the armature, be in pose mode. Then you can select the individual bone. It's not edit mode, it has to be pose mode. You select this, that's the IK control, hold shift, select the lower leg. And now remember, not in constraints, you have to be in bone constraints. They look similar, and even the names are similar. And in bone constraints, you have one called inverse kinematics. When you click on that, now that bone, that last one we selected, has now on the bone constraint an IK constraint. Now you have to choose a target. That's what this bone is here. So remember, in pose mode, select this. I'll select the eyedropper and I'll choose that. And then it's going to say, okay, well, your top target is actually an armature. But when you do an armature, okay, what part of the armature? What bone of it? Now, you could click here, and then surprisingly, it doesn't actually have an eyedropper. So what I'm going to do, since I have in the name IK, I'll click on here and I type in IK, and it will filter for any name in the bones that have IK. And this one is the left leg IK, the _L IK, which is that. So now in pose mode, if I select this and move it up, well, it seems like it's acting pretty weird. So we're going to have to fix this. If I select this, and going to be IK chain will be 2. What has to be that. So now if I select this, now it's going to work. Because what happens is that this is how it works in Blender. When you're doing IK, if you don't say the chain length, it's going to take everything in the hierarchy. So this bone over here, if I hover over here in the outliner and press period, this is the bone, and these are everything in the hierarchy. So it's going to try to do the IK chain, try to solve all the IK where the rotation is supposed to be for all these up here. For the upper leg here, for the hip, and for the spine all the way down to the root. But now we have that, it's going to work. So if I take it, it's going to bend, which is good. And move it up and down, that will bend. The other thing you want to do, if you select this again, that bone chain will have the IK chain here. And I said, okay, it's going to be following the target of the armature, and on the armature, take that bone IK to move. But I could also choose a pole target. If I click on here, at least this one has an eyedropper, and I click on that because it's actual object. Again, it's the armature because this is a bone. So I have to choose here again. I'll click on here because I call it pole already, I believe in the name. If I put pole right there, I have _L, and it'll choose that one because that's the name. So now what happens is that if I take this and I bend this up, so it's going to bend. And if I select this, this is going to like do the twist of it, right? Now the problem with this is that, as you can see, this is not bending in the right direction. And that is due to, if I select this, you'll have the pole angle. And you have to, and this works in every other software, you have to choose the angle. So it's actually, looks like it's 90 degrees. So I'm going to undo this, undo, and undo, just so it resets back. And I'll select this because I already checked it as 90 degrees. So I put pole angle 90 degrees. And so now if I move this up and down, you'll see that now it bends in the right direction and this turns. So now in pose mode, if I were to animate this, I can now select, let's say, the root. I'll move that, for example, or I can press G, Shift Z to stay on the X and Y plane that will position the character. Then I can take this main control, and then I can move the character, or I could take him and like move him down, and I could rotate him. Well, go on the X-axis, rotate him forward, for example. I might change this to local or something like that, and then I get to rotate him. Same thing with the arm. You could rotate that. To recap, we learned about the armature basics. We learned about skinning theory. We learned about rigid rigs and how you could use rigid binding so it looks like the actual like hard surface modeling kind of things are following directly with the bones. We learned about weight painting, so it looks like organic modeling or things are deforming smoothly. And we learned about the constraint systems that the armatures use and the controls, so you could visually see them, so it looks a little more organized and better interface to interact with for user experience, mainly the animator. Aesthetics, that's part of it. How we actually could color code left side and right side and the center. Industry standard, character left is blue color for the controls, character right is the red color, and center is usually yellow. It's not a hard rule, and a lot of places don't follow that, but if you're just starting out and you don't have anything to go by, at least that will help distinguish that. And then I showed from scratch how you could rig a character within Blender directly. And then at the end, how you could organize it and how animations are done, and the separation in for an armature from edit mode, where you actually set up the bones and the hierarchy, and also in pose mode, where you actually move them and animate them and set up constraints and set up the visual controls for those. The next step, apply all taught methods and put them into practice. Actually take everything you've done and actually go rig an actual character with this. Bonus tip, rig your characters and actually put them in your portfolio and your demo reels, and apply that, give them to studio representatives or recruiters. You'll see how much more of them actually respond based off of the fact that you actually could bring a character to life and you know how to do it, because a lot of people don't know how to do this, and it's extremely crucial that you can do this in almost any production, even if it's a static image, because you could actually pose your character. Biggest mistakes to avoid: trying to make the rig perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect rig. You only need to rig what you need for the purpose of what you're doing. If you're going to rig the character just to pose it, don't do super complicated rig systems like IKFK switching or reverse. Well, maybe you might want to do a reverse foot rig, but use things that are actually useful. And you also have to measure the amount of effort you have to do to make it work versus what you're going to get out of it, right? Basically, what I showed you is the basics of it, the bare minimum, and I could pretty much articulate the entire character. In fact, early 3D used just that whole production, just had just that feature set. And as I gone through them and did postmortems, they're like, hey, it would be nice if the rig's able to do that. So when you iterate and do postmortems and look at it, you will see it will be nice going through it, add this feature and add it one at a time based on what you did. And the other thing as well, the way it's designed, this is actually prime candidate to actually code it, knowing how to code, meaning that you only do the work one time, you put it in code, and then you could do this 1,000 times over. So imagine literally getting paid to do the same work over and over, but it's already done for you. Not only that, it's not just that, but also it actually makes it possible that you could do this 1,000 times. And knowing how to do these things and adding these features, it makes it a lot easier to add a feature as well, because you could just run the code to just do what you just did. And then now the rest of the time you would normally go and do this again for a brand new character, you could actually go and code that out, or just explore new things. And when you figure that out, put that in code, and then you explore something else. And that's how you add new features that each time gets better and better. What are your thoughts? Leave your comments below.